express my sincere appreciation at you having honored the invitation to be with us this morning. And let me greet you all in your eminence. As indicated, I'm accompanied by my colleagues, members of the Mayoral Committee. A Mayoral Committee is an equivalent of a cabinet at the local government level, at the local state level. So that's the significance we are attaching to this interaction, the informal conversation we want to have with you. I guess it will be appropriate, Program Director, with your permission, maybe to observe a moment of silence in honor of Shoes, one of the most iconic figures in the South African sporting scene, football. So if we can rise and just okay, thank you very much, colleagues. Now, let me make the point that we are of the opinion that the city has, over a passage of time, produced some of the most iconic figures in the country. Some of you have transcended the domestic borders. You are recognizable figures across the globe, on the continent. But there's very little the city has done to celebrate your being and your contribution to whatever space you find yourself in. So we thought that it might be useful for us to initiate a process where we are able to celebrate your contribution. I guess that it's more appreciated if your own origin begins to celebrate you even ahead of the rest of the world. So that's a part of the reason why we have called you to be part of this interaction this morning. But secondly, that you exert a lot of influence in your space. There's an orbit that you exist in, and there's a lot of people that take your views very seriously. Whatever you say, whatever you do, you don't do, people take it very seriously. So if you like, you have a disproportionate amount of influence on people's attitude to cities, to governance, to democracy, to leadership, and many other things that we can think of. So it's important that if we seek to convey the kind of message that we want to convey to the general public, we must seek extraordinary ways and alternative platforms of conveying that message. And that message is not about sugarcoating what the city is doing, but surfacing and exposing what the real facts are, one. But two, it's important that we are able to get some form of feedback from yourselves. Now, this session is not necessarily for that, but we can create avenues to do that in a much more plausible and effective manner. To receive feedback from yourselves as influencers on what is it that the city can do better. Because I guess you still relate to this place, as it might not be now your primary residence, but there's some attachment to this place, and you want to see us preserving this space. You want to see us improving this space. You want to see us ensuring that we are able to improve the quality of life of people in this area. Because after all, that's where you come from. So there's, if you like, an organic link between you and the space that you have come to call Tshwane. So before you can begin to celebrate other spaces, before you can begin to celebrate your newfound places of residence, it's important that as you reflect on your roots, as you reflect on your progression in life, certainly one of the chapters will say something about where you started, and that's the city of Tshwane. So you are, if you like, inextricably linked to the space that we call the city of Tshwane. So it's important that ourselves as the city principal, we occasion an opportunity to have a conversation with you about the kind of things that we are doing in this space that we call the city of Tshwane. So that as and when you engage with other people from whatever space you find yourself in, at least as a basic minimum, you have what will be the true facts about the city. And where you think that it's a good message, we rely on you to propagate it. Where you think that there are certain weaknesses, we expect you to give us that feedback. Like I said, you exert a disproportionate amount of influence in society. So we are going to gain an inordinate amount of value in that conversation, the interaction that we want to have with yourselves in all your manifestations. I've indicated, or Blessing has indicated, we have people here very influential in the sporting fraternity, people who are radio personalities, people who are business people, people in the arts. You mentioned every form of life. We find some of the most prominent and preeminent experts from the city of Tshwane, and you represent the cream and the core of those individuals. So we think that it's about time that we really have this conversation. Now, in less than 10 minutes, I want to share with you some of the things that we are doing in the city. You might be familiar with some of the things I'll be sharing with you, so I might be preaching to the converted, but you might be unfamiliar with some of the dimensions or some of the reasons why we have arrived at the trajectory that we have determined for ourselves going forward. So just allow me in 10 minutes to do that. Well, in the first instance, we've come to appreciate that planning is a function of an enduring vision. So you must begin to comprehend the end state, and once you are able to comprehend and define the end state, you must be able then to trigger a set of actions that is going to allow you to arrive at that end state. Now, that set of action can be in the space of the economy, the space of space, can be in the space of sports, and all of the manifestation that makes the city life. So the constellation of those interventions must all gravitate towards the realization of what we have defined as the end state. And obviously, the pace, the proportions of those interventions are a function of the starting point, where you see yourself now relative to the end state, and it's a function of other social forces that are with you and that are working against you. Consolidate those that are with you, and then mitigate against the adverse impact of those that are against you. And then you'll be able to define the set of action that needs to be taken. Now, that end result is to have a space that allows people to coexist. So the spatial justice in that the end state, that end state speaks about a society that is prosperous. Now, prosperity is not just only the defeat of hunger, but the ability of people to exercise choices. You are able to exercise choice because the resources that we have, the dispensation that has been created allows you to exercise those choices. I mean, there are people who are living in conditions of abject poverty. They don't know where they are going to get their next meal. So their choices are limited because their relationship to life is about survival. So they are unable to comprehend a life beyond tonight, and at the most beyond the end of the week. So once you have created a space that allows for prosperity to flourish, it means invariably that our people are able to exercise choices. So that's the end state that we want to have. It's an end state where we are able to exploit the endowments that the city have, the new creations that the city will discover over a passage of time. And in this instance, I'm talking about the discovery of knowledge, its exploitation in favor of the end state that we want to achieve. So it's important that in that end state, that our people have got a broad flow of possibilities. Now, I might sound to be theoretical, but I'm going to give you practical examples. Then we have a better appreciation of that end state. So that's the end state that we have created for ourselves. Now, and that end state is of a capital city that is non-racial, non-sexist, democratic, united, and prosperous. You can mention all those 5 elements that define the kind of society we want to construct. And it's a capital city of a democratic republic. It's important that we emphasize that it's a democratic republic because there's coexistence. Our people are able to exercise choices. There's freedom of movement, freedom of speech. we are allowed to have differing opinions, but still continue to work towards a common agenda. So that's the kind of end state we want to construct. Now, there's a number of initiatives that we have started in the city. And the primary consideration of these initiatives is primarily about reconfiguring the space that we call the city. Many of you are familiar, or some of you, because you might not have visited home for a period because of your responsibilities that you need to satisfy outside the borders of the city. We have something called REN, which is a bus rapid transport system. Now, it's a mass public transport system because we want to penalize private car usage. We want to ensure that there's a transition from private car usage to mass public transport. I know it might not augur very well with a lot of you assembled here today because you represent the middle class. And by definition, the middle class, not by definition, in some instances is about opulence, it's about the consumption, and part of the consumption and the demonstration of your economic and social mobility, upward mobility, is about the cars you drive. We get to visit home, not because we want to see the parents, but because I want to show my friends that I've got the latest set of wheels, so that it affirms the fact that there's upward mobility. I guess those are the variables that unfortunately determines upward mobility. So it's more material in their conception as opposed to many other higher order consideration as defined by Maslow. But let's leave that aside. So the point is that we have created REN. Its principal objective is to make sure that the poor and the affluent are able to use this iconic form of transport that is reliable, affordable, safe, and efficient. And that there's prestige in riding public transport. Because now what is associated with public transport is poverty, is lack of affluence, is inability of our people to exercise choices. Because if you had the choice, you would have bought yourself a new set of wheels. So we want to make it fashionable for people to ride in the bus. But remember, the end state is not about the delivery of this, the fleet called REN. It's about how we want to reconfigure the space. Those of you who have been into the city lately, you'll see there are cranes almost all over. We are bringing the poor from the periphery into the center of the city. Because it can't be the case that the space that we call the CBD is for the exclusive use of the very few and the privileged. And that is generally the affluent. And there's gentrification. Then gentrification is around the socio-economic displacement of our people spatially. Because once we crowd in investment in the CBD, the land prices go up, the price you pay for rentals, apartments go up because of the infrastructure, and therefore the poor are displaced. So we want to bring the poor into the CBD, undermine the narrative that the poor are or belong in the periphery. So it might not be as apparent now, but the end result is exactly that. So what you are going to see is the reconstruction of the physical morphology of apartheid city. When I say morphology, I mean its physical construction. Because hitherto, the poor are in the periphery. Where do you find informal settlements? You find them in the outskirts. You find them in Pumulong, Atteridgeville, extreme west. You find them in Pumulong, Mamelodi, extreme east. You find them in the far north of Hammanskraal. And then you find them in the far south here in Olive and Houtbosch. So the poor are located there. But the centers of economic production are located in the CBD and the other antennas of the CBD, which is Main Lane, which is Centurion. So the poor spend a disproportionate amount of time and money accessing those opportunities. And in fact, the World Bank makes the point that the poor spend up to 70% of their incomes traveling. So we want to close that space. As you close that space, you are creating new opportunities. And that's about social cohesion. It's about white people, it's about Africans, Indians, and colored coexisting because we have closed this space. And in them coexisting, you are creating an opportunity for posterity, future generation, to see themselves and define themselves beyond color, but see themselves as South Africans, people of Gauteng, and people of Tshwane. And then that end state that I spoke about, which one of its elements is about a non-racial society, gets to be realized, but its trigger in this instance was Arieng. So that's what we are doing. So Arieng is about the efficient movement of people from their localities. And as to where you've got corridors of Arieng, when I say corridors, the main routes where Arieng is, like Nanasita, for an example, you are able to create new housing typologies, and you are able to bring the poor there, so they are able to access public transport. And then the aspiration of creating a non-racial South Africa, a non-racial Gauteng, Tshwane, becomes almost possible. Now, I'm trivializing what is a very complex social problem, but I'm trying to demonstrate what one intervention can do in contributing towards that realization. So I accept that is very complex. We can write a thesis alone on how you want to create spatial justice, access, making sure that everyone has got an equal amount of time, an equal amount of opportunity to access public transport. Then the second thing that we're doing is spreading this thing called the penetration of free Wi-Fi. And let me tell you the thinking around free Wi-Fi. Many of you might argue that there's a lot of people who are staying in conditions of abject poverty. People want roads in Amanskrali, in Soshanguve, Quattreville, one sports field, this place and that place. I just shared with you that we've got informal settlement. Why are you taking 150 million annually from your budget to extend the penetration of free Wi-Fi? Our view is the following, is that we must start to treat internet connectivity as a basic service. In the same manner that we treat water, electricity, sanitation, we need to treat internet connectivity in that way, because the world becomes to be transformed because of new ideas, new discoveries, exploitation of new knowledge. And the biggest library that we have is the internet-enabled cell phone. On the tip of your fingers, you are able to access any form of information that you require. So you don't need, it's redefining the library as a physical space, as a destination. So on the palm of your hands, you've got access to a plethora of information that you can use for your own advantage. The World Bank makes the point that the maturity of internet ecosystem has got the potential of growing GDP growth by 3%. So you are able to ensure that what you call the digital divide is undermined. Go to the townships now. Many of you, some of you have recently visited the township. Is that the largest gatherings you are seeing now in the townships is around the free Wi-Fi sites. Young people are able to access job opportunities. Young people are able to submit their CVs to access those opportunities. Young people go to the parks to do research, something that you and I might be taking for granted because we've got that connection at home, because we